We have whatever's more than transparency. We have people actually making stuff up, and they still don't go to jail. Imagine that in China. Imagine in China somebody writes a book and they just make up a bunch of stuff that happened behind closed doors that the president said. Oh yeah, then President Xi said, let's kill all the Uyghurs or whatever. And you imagine that, how long that would last in China. So not only does the United States have transparency, but we have whatever's past that, where people can just make stuff up and they still don't go to jail. It's kind of amazing, actually. I would like to see our goal explicitly changed to careful herd immunity and/or vaccinations. Because right now, just hiding, I feel like isn't getting us closer to the end point. As this doctor says, is just pushing off the end point. And if you push off the end point, you're also pushing off the point that your economy can recover. And every single day that I open up the news, it looks like there's just more hatred for China. And it's just growing and growing and growing. And here's what I would worry about. This is a persuasion trick. People become whatever you act like they are. So, boo, stop it. So here's an example. If you meet somebody new for the first time and you simply act like you're their best friend, how do they act? Well, they just sort of automatically act friendlier. They might not act like your best friend, but if you act friendly to people, they act friendly back. It's just automatic. We mirror people automatically. If you treat somebody like an enemy, how will they act? Well, if you treat them like an enemy, they're going to act like an enemy. So, to a large extent, it's not 100%, effective, but to a large extent, you can cause other people to become what you want by treating them that way. You can actually treat somebody like a friend until they become a friend, treat them like an enemy until they become one. Now, China was kind of a special case because apparently, at least culturally, we're told, the Chinese culture has some kind of dominant, conquering, we must take over the world kind of a vibe to it, which honestly, I would say is unconfirmed. Yeah, my cat's just going crazy over there now. I have to move all the things on my desktop because she's knocking them on the ground. Bad kitty. So here's the thing. If we just tell China, you have done all these bad things, you stole our stuff, and you lied about the coronavirus, and you're locking Uyghurs in concentration camp, and you're using Falun Gong people for, forced transplants. If you're doing all that, so we're going to treat you like an enemy. How would China respond? Well, I think they'd respond like an enemy. We've tried to treat them like a friend, and I think we'd all agree it didn't work, right? It feels like it was worth a try. I don't think I would have any bad feeling about anybody who wanted to get closer to China in the past, because it kind of was worth a try. But now we tried, right? So the trying is over. We tried. It clearly didn't work. Being friends with them just isn't a model that can work for us. Now, we don't have to be their enemy. That would be the worst thing we could do. The worst thing we could do is just say, all right, you're our enemy now, so we're just going to treat you like an enemy. Wouldn't do that. I would go a different way, and I would depersonalize it, and I think the president's instincts would be similar, because he's big on being respectful to the leadership for practical purposes. And, the idiot opposition acts as though Trump can't tell the difference between President Xi. Oh man, did I want to swear just then. Whoa! Every once in a while, the curse words just well up into my throat, and I have to eat them to choke them back. But I was going to say some unkind things about President Xi, so I'll say them in less cursy tones. President Trump apparently is smarter than all of his critics on the left, unless they're just pretending. Because quite obviously, and he's not trying to hide it even in the least, when he talks about President Xi being awesome and powerful and a good friend of his, that's not personal. He's not actually talking about his good friend, President Xi. If you believe that, you're an idiot. No. The president is treating the leader of the biggest country in the world, at least in population, with respect because that's functionally the best thing to do. It's obvious, it's just for effect. Now, does he like him personally? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, they spent some time together. He might like him personally. But believe me, whatever President Trump says about President Xi in public to the United States is for effect. It's not what he actually thinks. How dumb would you have to be to think that the president, this is the only time he's telling you exactly what he really thinks? No. He's the president. He's treating other leaders with respect. He tells you that directly. He says it directly. Of course I'm treating the leaders with respect. And then he goes hard at them with tariffs and other complaints. So I think the president's on the same page, which you don't need to treat them like an enemy, but at the same time you could be clear-eyed about what the risk is. So here's how I would go. I've said this before, but I'm going to say it better. Rather than treating China as an enemy, we should treat it as an incompatible system. We should just say, you know, we've got this electronic thing we want to plug into the wall socket, but we need voltage of 110. You've got 220. It's not our opinion that that's good or bad. We're not criticizing you. You're not our enemy. I'm just saying I have a toaster that requires 110, but your system is 220. We tried plugging in and it blew up my toaster. And then we tried plugging in the hair dryer, and the hair dryer blew up too. So then we tried plugging in our electric car and my Tesla blew up. And then I tried, plugging in my phone and my phone blew up. How many things do we have to blow up before we find out that you can't plug a 110 device into a 220 outlet? So he says, get an adapter. Stop it, you engineers. Stop ruining my analogy with your clever engineering solutions. My point is, we should just say, while you have a system that doesn't have transparency, you can't connect to a system that does. Now, do we have all the transparency in the world? No. Even the United States could have far better transparency, but it's pretty good, wouldn't you say? I mean, we are pretty close to transparent. I mean, we even have transparency on things that didn't happen. We have so much transparency, we know the things that did happen behind closed doors, plus people are writing entire books about things that didn't even happen. We have whatever's more than transparency. We have people actually making stuff up, and they still don't go to jail. Imagine that in China. Imagine in China somebody writes a book and they just make up a bunch of stuff that happened behind closed doors that the president said. Oh yeah, then President Xi said, let's kill all the Uyghurs or whatever. And you imagine that, how long that would last in China. So not only does the United States have transparency, but we have whatever's past that, where people can just make stuff up and they still don't go to jail. It's kind of amazing, actually. So I think you could boil it down to that. You can't plug a transparent system into a non-transparent system and get a good result for the transparent one. The non-transparent one will do just fine, right? Remember, you plug your toaster into the 220, the toaster blows up. I don't know if this is true because I'm not an electrician, but imagine if I were an electrician and I knew what I was talking about right now. Wouldn't this be a cool story? So just imagine this is true. You plug your 110, I have no idea if this happens. You plug your 110, you couldn't do it because the plugs would be different, but imagine you did. You plug it in, your toaster blows up, but the 220 outlet is fine. The outlet is fine, it's only the toaster that got injured. So as long as we're a transparent system, we're vulnerable to plug into a non-transparent system. And I think we should just keep it simple. Say it's not about communism. We don't care. Do we care? Do you really care if the Chinese government is communist? No, you only care how it affects you, how it affects the world. We don't really care how other countries govern themselves. I mean, we'd like them not to be murdering their citizens, right? But it is kind of up to them. I mean, there's not much we can do about it. So that's how I'd do it. I would depersonalize it and say you can't plug a transparent system into a non-transparent system. And if you do, only one of them can win. Only the non-transparent can win because they can take from the transparent side, but they give nothing. They don't even tell you if they have a pandemic coming. So that's how I would decouple. I would decouple entirely based on transparency because it can't be argued. There's no argument about it. And you don't have to argue whether a communist system is better than a democratic system, right? Because transparency isn't really technically built into the communist system. If you said, China, can you describe the communist system? Would there be anything on their list that describes their government in their own opinion that said, oh yeah, and we don't do transparency because communists don't do transparency? That's not actually part of the system. So you can actually ignore communism ignore the entire system of government and say, we don't really care what kind of system you have. We care about transparency. And if you don't have that, it doesn't matter what else you're doing. We don't care if you got a king, a dictator, a communist system. We don't care if you're democratic. You could be Democrats. If you have no transparency, I guess that doesn't work if you're democratic, but if you have no transparency to us, it doesn't work. All right, so China's going down. There's no two ways about it. Let me say this as clearly as I can. In 5 years, China's going to be a bad place. It's going to be a bad place because it's going to be doing nothing but going downhill. And I think that's guaranteed at this point. The U.S., however, in 5 years is going to be really, really good shape. I'll tell you where you want to be. The United States in 5 years. Boy, do you want to be in the United States in 5 years because it's going to be an amazing place. This year, a little problematic. So last night on, was it Levin show, I think it was, Dr. David Katz, the founding director of the Yale Griffin Prevention Research Center in Connecticut. He says what I've been saying. So apparently I'm a qualified virologist now because what I've been saying for months is now being said by an actual doctor. Now, it's not like other doctors haven't said this before, but he's the clearest one. It goes like this. He says if you, I want to get his exact words. I didn't write down his exact words. The basic thing is he's saying that unless you have vaccines, which we don't have, or you have herd immunity, which we don't have, unless you have one of those two things, there's no such thing as getting back to normal. And he suggests that the longer we're in isolation and avoiding the virus, we're just pushing the problem into the future. Now, I suppose you could push it into the future, like theoretically, until the vaccine's here. But we know that won't work because it's just too long. And if we can't close the economy for a year or 18 months, I think everybody agrees that's too long. So we can't wait for a vaccine. So let's take one of the two possibilities off the table. All right, if vaccine doesn't help us soon enough, what is the only other thing that could work, according to a doctor who's an expert on prevention? I assume it's this kind of prevention. And actually, I don't know what kind of prevention he's a doctor of, so let me not assume I know his credentials. But he got on TV. He's a doctor who got on TV. That's worth something. So he's basically saying we should go ahead and get the herd immunity. Well, he doesn't say it as directly as that. I'll just say it directly. So I've said that we should rethink what our goal is. The goal should not be to avoid it. The goal should be to get it in the most careful way. So in other words, if we're not already letting out the people who are unlikely to die from it, so that they can get some immunity, we can't really ever get there. There's no way to get from here to there, right? So I'm very much on that team, which is to say, and I think we're on the right path, really, because as we carefully reopen the government, the infections should spread. I think the only gating factor should be the ICUs, and unfortunately, the only thing that should slow us down is the hospital resources. And I think we're in much, much better shape on hospital resources than we thought we would be. So that seems to be the only path. And you know what's interesting about it is that the public, with all of their protests and going to the beach and huddling and stuff, it seems to me, actually, no, people didn't talk about convalescent blood serum. He should have said that that was the third option, right? Because wouldn't convalescent blood serum also get you to something like herd immunity if you did enough of it? So I think we should change our strategy. I think our strategy should be explicitly to get to herd immunity, but to do it with the least possible death. So there's probably some strategy for doing that involves infecting the young, keeping the old away for at least a month, and then hoping you've got immunity. Maybe you can test for antibodies in a few months. Anyway, I would like to see our goal explicitly changed to careful herd immunity and/or vaccinations. Because right now, just hiding, I feel like isn't getting us closer to the end point. As this doctor says, is just pushing off the end point. And if you push off the end point, you're also pushing off the point that your economy can recover. It certainly makes sense to push off your end point if the only thing you're worried about is dying, because it keeps your hospital resources as open as possible. But if the economy is a variable too, I think you want to do it sooner. I think you want to get the economy going, get the infections going. X number of people are going to die no matter what you do. It's an adult decision. And by the way, I've heard a number of other people use the phrase adult decision. It's a really good one. In terms of persuasion, if you get in an argument with some idiot who's just being political and acting as though there's a choice where nobody dies, that's the child view. Oh, I'll take the child view, please, where the economy's good and nobody gets the virus. I'll have that one, please. And you say, well, we don't have that choice. You got to make tough choices. Somebody's going to die because the economy went bad. Different people. Other people will die if you do the other plan where the virus goes everywhere. So you just sort of have to pick. And I'll say it again. If there's nobody in the country who wants to make the choice, I'll do it. Not my job, obviously, nor do I think I'm especially qualified. But if you need an adult to make an adult decision and you don't want to make it yourself, I'll do it. I won't like it. I mean, it would mess me up for the rest of my life, wouldn't it? I mean, if you made a decision that you knew killed people, you'd never really be the same, I don't think. I don't think I would be the same. But if it's the only way to get from here to there, the country requires somebody to make a decision, and it's going to have some kind of a psychic load on that person for the rest of their life. Well, I'm pretty hardened against that thing. I'm pretty mentally tough. I'll do it. If you need an adult to tell you which way to go and people are going to die, I'll do it. If we don't have any other adults who will do it, I'll do it. All right? We won't come to that. I'm just saying that we should just stop talking with children about the impossible ways. Let's get a flying unicorn, and then the economy will be good, and nobody will have the virus. Okay, children, you're done now.